Hello everyone and welcome to this special CPG series on neurological disorders in children. I am Dr. Presley Krasati and I'm excited to guide you through this important topic. We are seeing more and more children in our classroom who learn differently. They may not always follow typical developmental patterns, but with the right support, they may learn, grow and succeed. This is not just about teaching strategies. This is about understanding how the brain works differently and creating inclusive spaces where every child belongs. In this first session, we'll focus on understanding what neurological disorders are, autism spectrum disorder, its signs, symptoms, and classroom strategies, Asperger syndrome, its features and support approaches. The objectives include define neurological disorders in simple terms, identify early indicators of autism spectrum disorder, understanding how ASD affects communication, behaviors, and learning, recognize the characteristic of Asperger syndrome, and apply practical strategies to support children in inclusive classrooms. Understanding neurological disorders. Let us try to understand the term neurological disorders. Neurological disorders are conditions that affects the nervous system, especially the brain. They influence how children communicate, learn, behave, and interact with others. These conditions typically appear early in childhood and are developmental in nature. It must be noted that they are not caused by parenting style or bad behavior. However, they are brain-based differences. Many children with neurological disorders have average or above average intelligence, but their brain processed information differently. Early signs may include delayed speech or language, difficulty making eye contact, sensory sensitivities, trouble following instructions or transitions, unusual repetitive behaviors, poor attention span, learning difficulties. But remember, every child is unique. These signs may appear differently in each child. These differences often become clearer when children enter preschool or school when social and academic demands increase. Our role as educator is to recognize these early signs, respond appropriately, and support both the child and their family. Think of one student you have worked with who showed learning and behavioral differences. What did you observe? Maybe you observed that the child cannot sit still, or maybe found some students who are often found to be talking to themselves or play on their own spaces. I bet you have come across many other signs shown by your student, but you just don't know what they are. Hence, in this session, we are going to discuss these important topics which will equip you with the right information that will enable you to become a better educator. Autism spectrum disorder. Let us dive in depth into these neurological disorders one by one. Autism spectrum disorder, commonly known as autism or ASD, is a type of developmental neurological disorder. According to DSM-5, that is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, it defines autism spectrum disorder as autism spectrum disorder is characterized by persistent deficit in social communication and social interaction across multiple contexts, along with restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. In practice, this means the child may have difficulty making friends or playing with others, prefer to stay in their own space, display repetitive behaviors such as hand flapping, rocking, spinning, finger flicking, tapping, or walking on tiptoes, show a preference for arranging objects in patterns or straight line. So that is what ASD is as per the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder. It is important to note that symptoms appear early in development, usually before age 3. They may vary from mild to severe. Every child with autism is different. The severity of ASD is specified based on support needs, that is level 1, 2, or 3. Let us try to look at some of the diagnostic criteria of ASD to better understand what it really means. According to DSM-5, to meet the diagnostic criteria for ASD, a child must show persistent deficit in social communication and interaction, such as deficits in social emotional reciprocity, deficit in nonverbal communicative behaviors, deficit in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships, restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities, such as stereotype or repetitive movement, use of objects or speech, insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routine, highly restricted fixated interests, hyper or hypo-reactivity to sensory input. Symptoms must be present in the early developmental period, though they may not fully manifest until social demands exceed capacities. These are the three main diagnostic criteria for ASD. To better understand each one of them, let us discuss each diagnostic criteria in detail with some practical examples. The first diagnostic criteria, persistent deficit in social communication and interaction, such as deficits in social emotional reciprocity. What does this mean? This means the child may have difficulties with back and forth social interaction, including sharing emotions, responding appropriately, and initiating social exchanges. Let us take a look at some practical examples. Difficulty initiating or responding to social interaction. In this case, a child does not respond when someone calls their name or does not initiate greetings like hello or goodbye. In some cases, the child appears uninterested when someone tries to talk or play, or he or she is not making the first move to join group activities. For example, when a classmate says hi, the child does not look up or respond at all. Limited sharing of emotions or interests. In this case, a child is not showing or pointing out things they like, example like toys or drawing. Or a child is not reacting when others share something, exciting or sad. They are not smiling back when someone smiles at them. Or they are not expressing joy to others even when happy. In some cases, they are not even able to express even when they themselves are sad. Often, children suffering from ASD show their emotions like sadness or happiness in different ways. Sometimes they flap their hands repeatedly when they are happy, or sometimes even when they are anxious, they would flap their hands. For example, a child builds a block tower but doesn't look up or show it to the teacher or peers. Poor turn-taking in conversation. This means the child is speaking only about their own interests without waiting for others. He or she is not answering questions appropriately. They would repeat phrases instead of engaging in meaningful exchange. They would interrupt or play or talk over others without noticing. For example, when asked, "What do you do at school?" the child repeats, "School, school, school." Or start talking about something which he or she is interested in, example like trains. Reduce or absent social reciprocity behaviors. This means that the child have limited imitations of gestures like waving back, giving high fives. Not noticing or responding to another person's facial expression or tone. Rarely seeking comfort or offering it to others. Not joining in when others are laughing or playing together. For example, when another child falls and cries, the child with ASD may walk past without looking or reacting. Difficulty with joint attention. This means the child is not able to follow or pointing finger or eye gaze to share attention. Not pointing to show interest in something. Difficulty understanding or using nonverbal cues to connect with others. For example, when a teacher points at a bird outside the window, the child doesn't look in that direction or show interest. These are a detailed description with examples of the diagnostic criteria, that is, deficits in social emotional reciprocity. Basically, this means that a child suffering from ASD struggles with understanding and expressing emotions, struggles with making friends, and mostly they struggle with making or having conversation. Reduce or absent social reciprocity behaviors. This means that the child have limited imitation of gestures. Example like waving back, giving high fives. Not noticing or responding to another person's facial expression or tone. Rarely seeking comfort or offering it to others. Not joining in when others are laughing or playing together. For example, when a child falls or cries, the child with ASD may walk past without looking or reacting. Next, difficulty with joint attention. This means that the child is not able to follow or point finger or eye gaze to share attention. Not pointing to show interest in something difficulty. Understanding or using non-verbal cues to connect with others. For example, when a teacher points at a bird outside the window, the child doesn't look in that direction or show interest. These are a detailed description with examples of the diagnostic criteria, that is, deficits in social emotional reciprocity. Basically, this means that the child suffering from ASD struggles with understanding and expressing emotions, struggles with making friends, and mostly they struggle with making or having conversations. The next diagnostic criteria is deficits in nonverbal communicative behavior. This means children may have difficulties using and understanding body language, gestures, facial expressions, and eye contact, all of which are essential and typical for typical social communication. Let us take a look at some practical examples. Limited or absent eye contact. This means that children suffering from ASD rarely look at others during conversation. They would avoid eye contact when being spoken to. They will not use eye gaze to share attention or emotions. For example, when a teacher asks a question, the child looks down or away instead of making brief eye contact. Next, reduced use of facial expression. This means that they have a flat or neutral facial expression even when happy or upset. They would not smile back when someone smiles. They have difficulty showing emotions like surprise, excitement, or sadness. For example, even when receiving a favorite toy, the child's face remains expressionless. Next, poor use of gestures. This means that they will not use gestures such as pointing, waving, nodding, or shaking their head. They are not able to combine gestures with words for communication. For example, instead of pointing at a toy they want, the child may cry or pull the adult's hand. Difficulty understanding others' non-verbal cues. This means that they are not able to follow another person's pointing finger. They are not able to recognize someone's facial expression or body language. And as mentioned earlier, they have the difficulty to notice when someone is bored, upset, or happy. For example, if a peer is frowning and turning away, the child may continue talking without realizing the peer is upset. Lack of interaction and lack of integration of verbal and non-verbal communication. This means that the words and body language may not match. They would use monotone voice or flat intonation with little facial expression. They have difficulty coordinating gestures with speech. Example, when saying bye, the child may not wave or look at the person. The next diagnostic criteria is deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. This refers to difficulty in adjusting behaviors to suit different social contexts, sharing imaginative play, making friends, or understanding social rules and expectations. Let us take a look with some practical examples. Difficulty making and keeping friends. This means they prefer to play alone even when other children invite them. They don't know how to initiate play. Example, to say a sentence like, "Can I play too?" would never come to them automatically. They may approach peers in unusual ways. Example like pushing, grabbing toys, or standing too close. They may not understand the concept of friendship or shared interests. For example, during recess, other children are playing a ball game. The child with ASD stands nearby watching or walks away, unsure how to join in. Challenges in adapting behavior to social context. This means that they would talk to a teacher the same way they talk to a peer. Example, too informal or interrupting. They don't change the tone or language in different setting, that is in classroom or in playground. They may continue talking about their own interests even when others are not listening. For example, during a school assembly, the child keeps talking loudly about trains without noticing that everyone else is quiet. Limited or absent shared play or imaginative play. This means that they will prefer repetitive solitary play, like spinning wheels, lining up toys. They have difficulty engaging in pretending to play with others, like playing house or school. Has difficulty following the rules of cooperative games. For example, when others play teacher and students, the child may not follow the pretend scenario and instead repeats their favorite script from a cartoon. Difficulty understanding social rules or nuances. This means that they have difficulty to understand personal space or may stand too close. They have no understanding of unspoken rules like turn-taking or raising hands to speak. They may not understand sarcasm, jokes, or figurative language. For example, a peer jokes, "You're such a slowpoke." The child takes it literally and becomes confused or upset. Challenges in maintaining relationship over time. This means they may have short-term interactions but not sustain friendships. They won't respond when friends try to initiate future play or activities. They may not understand how to compromise, share, or cooperate. For example, a classmate invites a child to their birthday party. The child doesn't respond or show interest, leading to lost opportunities for bonding. So far, we have discussed on the first diagnostic criteria of ASD according to DSM-5. Now, let us take a look at the second diagnostic criteria. Restricted and repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities, such as stereotype or repetitive movements, use of objects or speech insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines, highly restricted fixated interests, hyper or hypo-reactivity to sensory input. Let us again discuss in detail on each criterion with some practical examples. Stereotype or repetitive movements, use of objects or speech repetitively. As discussed before, repetitive movement is often seen in children suffering from autism, like hand flapping when excited, anxious, or happy, rocking back and forth while sitting or standing, spinning or twirling in circles repeatedly, tapping fingers or feet rhythmically, jumping up and down repeatedly when excited. For example, a child flaps their hands excitedly every time a favorite cartoon starts. Repetitive use of objects. A child suffering from ASD are often found to line up toys or objects in a specific order over and over. Spin the wheels of a toy car instead of playing with it normally. Opening and closing of doors or drawers repeatedly. Focusing on a single part of a toy, like spinning the wheel of a toy truck, rather than playing with it as intended. Repetitively stacking blocks in the same patterns. For example, a child spends 10 to 15 minutes arranging all their crayons by color and then gets upset if the order is disturbed. Repetitive or echolalic speech. This means that they will repeat words or phrases over and over. Example like train, 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 train. They would echo what others say immediately or after delay, known as immediate or delayed echolalia. In some cases, they are often found to repeat lines from TV shows, movies, or songs. This is also known as gesture language. They sometimes have scripted language in social interactions, Example, always saying, "How are you?" even when not appropriate. For example, when asked, "Do you want juice?" the child repeats, "Do you want juice?" instead of answering, "Yes." The next diagnostic criteria is insistence on sameness or inflexible adherence. This means the children with this trait often become distressed when routines, sequences, or familiar patterns are disrupted. Here are practical real-life examples. Daily routine rigidity. This means that they want to follow the same morning or bedtime routines every day. They become upset if the order or task changes. Example, brushing teeth before breakfast instead of after. They insist on wearing the same clothes repeatedly. For example, a child refuses to eat breakfast if their cereal is not in the usual bowl or placed in the same spot. School or play routines. Here, they would insist on sitting in the same seat every day in class. They become anxious if classroom furniture is rearranged. They want to follow the same route to school or the playground. For example, if the classmate takes their desk, the child may refuse to sit or have a meltdown. Next, repetitive or fixed play patterns. This means that they play with toys in specific order, every time. Example like lining up cars in a strict sequence. They reject changes to rules in games or structured activities. They prefer to repeat the same story or activity rather than trying something new. For example, during a board game, if a dice roll doesn't follow the usual pattern, the child may refuse to continue. Anxiety around change. This means that they become distressed when plans are changed suddenly. They react negatively to unexpected visitors, changes in schedules, or holiday routines. They often need advance warning for even small changes. For example, a substitute teacher comes in, the child refuses to participate in the usual classroom activity. The next diagnostic criteria is highly restricted fixated interest. This refers to intense focus on a very specific topic or object, often to the exclusion of other activities or interests. These interests are usually strong, persistent, and sometimes unusual in focus. Here are practical real-life examples. Intense focus on objects or topics. This means that they are often found to have an obsession with something, for example, train, cars, airplanes, or dinosaurs. They would be able to memorize facts, schedules, or details related to their interests. They can talk about the topic constantly, even when others are not interested. For example, a child knows all train schedules, engine numbers, and can recite them at length during class, ignoring other topics. Repetitive collection or arrangement. This means that a child collects a large number of items related to the interest, like stickers, rocks, toy animals. They arrange items meticulously in a specific order. They become distressed if the collection or arrangement is disturbed. For example, a child arranges all toys, dinosaurs by size and gets upset if someone moves them. Narrow topic of conversation. This means that the conversation revolves only around their interests. They have difficulty in shifting topics even when prompted. They may recite facts in details without understanding the social context. For example, during circle time, the child keeps talking about space rockets, ignoring the teacher's question about favorite books. Exclusive play. This means that they prefer playing only with objects related to the interest. They avoid imaginative play or activities that do not involve their fixated topic. For example, a child refuses to play pretend house or doctor games, insisting instead on lining up toy cars. The next diagnostic criteria is hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory input. It refers to unusual responses to sensory stimuli, either overreacting, that is hyper, or underreacting, that is hypo, to sight, sound, touch, taste, or movement. Here are practical real-life examples. Hyperreactivity or oversensitivity to sensory input. In case of sound, they would cover their ears at loud noises like fire alarms, vacuum cleaners, crowded classrooms. In case of lights, they squint, shield their eyes, or avoid bright lights or sunlight. In case of touch, they would avoid certain fabrics, refuse to be touched, react strongly to messy play. In case of smell or taste, they reject food with strong smell or textures and gags easily. In case of movement, they become anxious or nauseated on swings or slides. For example, a child refused to enter the cafeteria because the fluorescent lights are too bright and the noise is overwhelming. Hyporeactivity or undersensitive to sensory input. In case of pain, they don't notice minor injuries like cuts or bruises. In case of sound, they may not respond to their name being called. In case of touch, they would seek strong pressure like tight hugs, squeezes objects. In case of movement, they would constantly rock, spin or jump to get vestibular input. In case of visual, they watch spinning objects or flickering lights for long periods. For example, a child repeatedly bangs their head lightly against a wall to feel pressure or seek movement like spinning in circles. The third and the last diagnostic criteria of ASD that we are going to discuss in this session is symptoms must be present in the early developmental period, though they may not fully manifest until social demands exceed capacities. This point is critical in understanding how and when autism spectrum disorder symptoms appear, according to DSM-5. What early developmental period means? This refers to the first few years of life, typically before age 3. Those signs may be noticed even earlier. It doesn't mean that every symptoms must be obvious at birth or infancy, but that the underlying neurodevelopmental differences are present early on. Why symptoms might not fully manifest immediately? Some deficits become noticeably only when the social communication or learning demands increased. For example, a child may have mild social delays at age 2 that are subtle. But by preschool or early years, when interacting with peers becomes more complex, difficulties in reciprocal conversation, social understanding, or flexibility becomes more obvious. For example, a 2-year-old may rarely make eye contact, but this might be attributed to shyness. At age 5, when asked to play in a group or follow multi-steps instructions, the deficits in social reciprocity, communication, or flexibility becomes clear. Why social demands reveals ASD? Children with ASD may cope well in highly structured or familiar settings, masking some difficulties. When demands increased, like in school, peer play, or group activities, the differences becomes more apparent. For example, a child may function well at home with one caregiver, but in a preschool class with many peers and new routines, challenges in communication, attention, and social interaction emerge. What can we understand from this third diagnostic criteria is that ASD symptoms are rooted in early brain development. They may not be fully obvious until later, but careful observation or early behaviors can allow earlier diagnosis and support, improving long-term outcomes. Important note to remember, early detection is crucial because interventions are most effective when started in early childhood. Teachers and parents should observe developmental milestones such as joint attention, like pointing to show interest, social emotional reciprocity, like sharing enjoyment, responding to others, language development, like gestures, words, two-words phrases by age 2, play skills like imaginative or symbolic play. The red flags that can indicate early ASD symptoms are limited eye contact, minimal response to name, delayed speech or gestures, repetitive movements or fixation on objects, DSM-5 merged the previously separated diagnosis of autistic disorder, Asperger disorder, and pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, known as PDD-NOS, into a single category, that is autism spectrum disorder. Also, it is important to remember that ASD is not the same for every child, and that the severity of ASD is specified based on support needs, that is level 1, 2 or 3. If the support needs is minimal, he or she may fall on level 1, which is mild. If average, then level 2. And if required maximum needs for support, he or she may fall on level 3 or severe. I hope you have understood about what ASD is, and I hope now you have some idea about its diagnostic criteria. This knowledge will help you to understand your students better and take necessary actions to help and support children and their family if needed. Now we are going to look at another neurological disorder, that is the Asperger syndrome. Asperger syndrome was historically considered a distinct neurodevelopmental disorder under the autism spectrum disorder. According to DSM-4, it was characterized by social deficits without significant delays in language or cognitive development, restricted repetitive patterns of behaviors and interests. In DSM-5 2013, Asperger syndrome is no longer a separate diagnosis. It is now part of the autism spectrum disorder level 1 requiring support. Let us discuss the key features of Asperger syndrome. First one, social communication and interaction. Children suffering from Asperger syndrome have difficulty in social reciprocity. As discussed earlier, social reciprocity means children having difficulty in joining conversation or making friends. They have difficulty understanding non-verbal cues like eye contact, facial expression, gestures, etc. They have trouble adapting behavior to different social contexts. For example, a child may dominate conversations talking about their special interests. Difficulty understanding jokes, sarcasm, or peer teasing. Restricted and repetitive behavior. This means that when a child has intense focus on a narrow topic like trains, numbers, or animals, or have preferences for routines and predictable patterns. When it comes to repetitive movements or behavior, children suffering from Asperger may be subtle compared to classic autism. For example, they have no problem in memorizing train timetables in detail, or they become distressed if daily routine changes. Next, cognitive and language skills. For children suffering from Asperger, they show no significant delay in language development, unlike some children with classic autism. They are found to have average or above average intelligence. They may have advanced vocabulary or strong memory in specific areas. For example, a child may speak fluently at an early age but struggle with pragmatics like turn takings or staying on topics in conversation. Next, motor coordination, clumsiness, or difficulty with fine and gross motor skills in common. They often have trouble with sports, handwriting, or tasks requiring coordination. For example, difficulty catching a ball or running smoothly during physical education. Messy handwriting or awkward pencil grip. Next, sensory sensitivities. Here, it's the over or under reactivity to sound like touch, taste, or movement. For example, covering ears at loud noises or seeking strong pressure sensation like tight hugs. Diagnosis. Diagnosis for Asperger is now made under ASD level 1 requiring support in DSM-5. Key indicators include significant social deficits without intellectual or language delays, restricted repetitive behaviors or interests. Daily functioning is impacted but not severely. Assessment tools. Assessment tools may include ADOS, that is Autistic Diagnostic Observation Schedule, social communication or questionnaire, parent interviews, and developmental history. So far, we have discussed on the difficulties of kids suffering from ASD and Asperger. Let us take a look at their strength. They are often highly intelligent or skilled in specific areas like math, music, or memory. They have strong attention to details and adherence to rules. They are honest, methodical, and reliable once routines are established. The update from DSM-5. DSM-4, that is before 2013, Asperger syndrome was separated from autism. However, DSM-5, that is 2013 onwards, Asperger is now ASD level 1 requiring support. The distinction is now more about severity and support needs rather than a separate diagnostic. Summary. Asperger syndrome is autism without language or intellectual delays, often with strong cognitive skills and intense narrow interest. Classic autism is autism with possible language or cognitive delays, with more severe social deficits and noticeable repetitive behaviors. Both are now under the autism spectrum disorder umbrella. The main difference is functioning level and support needs. Now, we have come to the last part of today's session. Here, we are going to discuss how schools can help and support children with ASD or Asperger syndrome. Schools play a crucial role in supporting these children to ensure that they learn effectively, participate socially, and reach their full potential. First one, early identification and intervention processes. Step 1, teacher observation and documentation. Observation by teachers is the critical first step. Educators should be highly observant and maintain documentation of students' behavior. They should systematically monitor and assess a students' communication skills, that is verbal and non-verbal cues, their social engagement, that is the ability to interact with peers and adults, share and play collaboratively, their attention and focus, that is sustaining concentration on tasks and following instructions. Restrictive or repetitive behaviors, any unusual or persistent behaviors like hand flapping, fixated interest. If any of these behaviors are significantly delayed or persistently absent, the teacher should promptly document the concern and initiate the next step. Step 2, referral, formal screening, and clinical diagnosis. Screening and assessment is initiated once teacher observe and document consistent red flags. Parent contact and school screening. The teacher should contact parents or guardians to share observations and discuss concerns. With parental consent, the school can then conduct preliminary formal screening to determine if a full evaluation is warranted. Multidisciplinary assessment. Schools often collaborate with specialists such as school psychologists, special educators, speech and occupational therapists to conduct comprehensive assessment and evaluate the students' educational needs. Clinical diagnosis. Based on the school's assessment and collaboration, the multidisciplinary team may recommend that the parents seek a clinical diagnosis from a qualified medical professional, that is a pediatrician or a clinical psychologist, to formally identify conditions like ASD. Step 3, individualized educational program development. Individualized educational program development begins once the child is determined to have an educational disability and needs specialized service. The IEP is a legal document that outlines services for the students. The IEP is prepared by a team that includes the teacher, parents, specialists, and where appropriate, the student. It outlines specific measurable goals, necessary accommodations, and specialized support that are tailored precisely to the child's unique strengths and challenges. Here is a case example. A teacher, Miss Lee, observed that a 4-year-old student, Alex, frequently struggles with eye contact and verbal communication with his peers. After observing Alex for several weeks and documenting his difficulty maintaining attention during group activities and engaging in pretend play, Miss Lee contacts Alex's parents for a discussion. With the parents' agreement, the school conducted formal social, emotional, and communication screenings, which confirm the needs for deeper evaluation. Miss Lee and the school team suggested the parent to seek a clinical evaluation. Alex was later clinically diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Following this, Ms. Lee, the parent, the school psychologist, speech therapist, and the occupational therapist convene as the IEP team to design a comprehensive plan for Alex, focusing on goals like increasing reciprocal communication exchanges and reducing sensory overload in the classroom. Classroom strategies for academic support. Structured environment. Enhancing predictability. A highly structured and predictable environment is essential for students who thrive on routines, especially those with learning differences or anxiety. These strategies reduce cognitive load and help students focus on learning rather than managing uncertainty. Core strategies can be applied are clear routines and visual schedules. The teacher should establish and consistently maintain routines. The daily and weekly schedule must be prominently displayed using visual aids like pictures, icons, or clear text. This reduces anxiety, supports predictability, and allows students to anticipate the sequence of activities. Consistent classroom layout. The physical arrangement of the classroom should remain consistent. Clearly define areas for different activities like quiet work zone, reading corner, group instruction area. All materials must have designated labeled homes. A consistent layout helps children know exactly where materials and activities are located, promoting independence and reducing transition time. By visual tracking the routine, students feel secure and prepare for the instructional time ahead. Differentiated instruction. Tailoring the approach. Differentiated instruction involves adapting the teaching content, processes, and product to meet the unique needs and learning styles of all students. This is crucial for accessibility and ensuring every student can engage with and master the curriculum. Core strategies. Multidisciplinary teaching. Incorporate multiple sensory pathways like visual, auditory, tactile, kinesthetic into the instructions to reinforce learning and cater to varied learning profiles. Engaging multiple senses improves information retention and deepens understanding, particularly for students who struggle with abstract concept or single modality instruction. Chunking and scaffolding lessons. Teachers should break lessons, assignments, and complex tasks into small, manageable steps, that is chunking. This requires providing clear support or gradual release of responsibility. This prevents cognitive overload, reduces frustrations, and ensures students build mastery sequentially. Redundant and multimodal instruction. Always provide instructions using multiple modes. For example, simultaneously deliver clear written instructions on the board or handout, alongside verbal explanation. This accommodates students who struggle with auditory processing or memory, ensuring they have a reliable reference point for the task. Example, teaching maths concept. A teacher employs a multi-sensory approach. For example, for a tactile kinesthetic learner, students use manipulators like fraction blocks to physically divide and combine parts. For visual learner, the teacher simultaneously displays clear diagrams on the board and uses chart to illustrate the concept. For auditory verbal learner, the teacher provides a clear verbal explanation while guiding the students through hands-on activities. This layered approach ensures that learning is reinforced across multiple channels, greatly increasing the chances of student success. Assistive technology. Assistive technology includes any device or software that enhance a student's ability to communicate, learn, and function. Core strategies include technology tools. Utilize tablets, speech-to-text tools, or educational software to help students with writing, organization, and subject engagement. For communicative support, provide augmentative and alternative communication device for non-verbal or minimal verbal students to facilitate expression and social interaction. Example, a student with limited functional speech is provided with a communication app on a tablet. The student can use this app to select icons and vocalize requests like "I need help," "I want a break," or "more water," allowing them to fully express their needs. Social and emotional support. For social skill training, social skills should be explicitly taught and practiced, often integrated into the student's IEP goals. Teaching skills such as turn-taking, greetings, sharing, understanding emotions, and pragmatic conversation skills. Employed structured methods like small group activities, peer buddies, and role-playing exercises to practice skills in a safe environment. Example, implementing a weekly social skills circle where children participate in structured role-playing to practice greetings, conversation starters, and problem solving with their peers. Next, the emotional regulation. Teaching and supporting with emotional regulation helps students manage stress and prevent meltdowns. Train staff and students to recognize signs of overwhelm or sensory overload, like pacing, covering ears, rapid breathing. Provide accessible and safe outlets such as designated quiet corners, calming objects, or planned sensory breaks. Example, a student becomes anxious during a loud assembly. The teacher notices the signs and allows the student to take a short supervised break in a quiet corner with a weight lap pad to regulate their emotions before rejoining the group. Peer awareness and inclusion. Fostering an inclusive environment starts with educating the students' peers. Educate classmates about diversity and inclusion in age-appropriate, positive ways, focusing on respecting differences. Encourage cooperative games and structured groups activities that requires participation from all students. Example, a teacher implements a peer buddy system, partnering a students with ASD with a rotating classmate to support social inclusion during unstructured times like recess or group projects. Managing restricted or repetitive behaviors. These behaviors are often functional, serving as a coping or self-regulatory mechanism. Understanding that these behaviors are generally self-regulatory or sensory-driven, not deliberate misbehavior designed to disrupt a class. Provide safe outlets such as fidget toys, movement breaks, or schedule structured repetitive activities to meet the sensory need appropriately. Integrate special interests into learning whenever possible to increase motivation and engagement. Example, a student is fascinated by trains. The teacher allowed a student to write a story about trains for a language art assignment, or use train-related counting and sequencing in a math lesson. Sensory support in school. Systematic identification and modification of the environment are essential for students with sensory sensitivities. Identify sensory triggers in the environment like loud noise, bright light, strong smells, tactile sensitivities. Adapt the environment by providing noise-cancelling headphones, soft lighting or dim corners. Reduce cluster flexible seating options like balancing ball or float cushions. Example, the student's locker is equipped with a sensory toolkit that contains a stress ball, noise-cancelling headphones, and a tactile fidget toy, which the students can use as needed. Collaboration with families and specialists. A consistent, multidisciplinary approach ensures the student receive unified support. Maintain regular open communication with parent caregivers to monitor progress and discuss challenges both at school and home. Collaborate closely with the entire specialist team, speech therapists, occupational therapists, psychologists, and special educators. Share strategies across school and home environments to ensure consistency and generalization of learned skill. For example, the IEP team schedule weekly progress updates and strategy discussed between the classroom teacher, parent, and the lead therapist to ensure continuity in intervention goals. Professional development for teachers. Ongoing training is vital for maintaining effective and inclusive practices. providing professional development training on ASD awareness, effective classroom strategies, social emotional support, and inclusive education best practices. Teachers should learn how to recognize early signs, adapt lessons, and manage challenging behaviors through evidence-based methods. For example, teachers attend a continuous professional development workshop focused on supporting students with autism in inclusive classroom and practice role-play scenarios to hone their implementation skills. Inclusive practices ensure the students is fully integrated and supported within the general education setting, promote peer acceptance and understanding throughout the school community, adapt assessment or allow alternative demonstrations of learning that focus on mastery of content, not just traditional writing or testing. Celebrate strength and achievements in all domains, not just academic performance. Example, to demonstrate understanding of a historical event, a student is allowed to present a project using a video poster or demonstration rather than being limited to a lengthy written answer. Monitoring and evaluation. The intervention plan must be a living document that changes as the student grows. Conduct a regular reviews of IEP goals and progress as mandated by the individualized plan. Adjust strategies and accommodation as needed based on the collected data and observation. Maintain meticulous document of improvements and challenges to guide future intervention planning. Example, every 6 to 8 weeks, the IEP team formally evaluates the student's academic, social, and behavioral progress and collaboratively update the support strategies for the next cycle. Important note, the foundational pillars of support. Schools are critical environment for supporting children with ASD or Asperger syndrome. Effective support combines structured, predictable classroom, differentiated instruction, and assistive technology, social and emotional support, sensory accommodation, collaboration with families and specialists, teacher training, and awareness. With these comprehensive measures, children with ASD or Asperger can thrive academically, socially, and emotionally, preparing them for a lifelong learning and inclusion. Autism and Asperger syndrome are not barriers to learning, but they do require understanding, patience, and thoughtful strategies. When we recognize their strength, support their challenges, and adapt our classroom, we create environments where children thrive. Thank you for joining this first CPT session on neurological disorders with a special focus on ASD and Asperger syndrome. In the second part, we will continue exploring neurological disorders, focusing on specific learning disability, intellectual disability, and attention deficit hyperactive disorder (ADHD). If you found this useful, please like, share, and subscribe to our DERT YouTube channel. Let's work together to build inclusive school for every learner. Thank you.